Hey everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And we were seeing before that we went live, but nothing connected to Facebook. So,
No.
We have made it through little glitches and tiny things have happened before, but thank you for being with us through these epic proportions of whatever is going on tonight. You got to love technology and you just got to work and roll with the punches.
Yep,
so
that's live for you.
I think like 2 or 3 of you had joined in already on YouTube, so that was awesome and appreciate you guys being here. And for those of you that didn't know that you could join us on YouTube, that is always an option and apparently a very reliable option. With that being said, it looks like we are connected here tonight, even through Facebook and things like that. So, if you are here, thank you for being here. And we are looking forward to the show tonight because we know it is going to be a good one. So I think when we started, I was on a whole kind of rant about having our collapsible fishing rods in the car. And actually, that is really awesome. We took the holiday. For some people, holiday means fishing time, and that's not true for everybody. And so, we had our collapsible rod, and we had a little reel on it. And the funny thing is, we had little jig heads, but no bait. Like out of all the plastics in my life that are in the bottom of my pockets and stuff, like I could not find one anywhere. And so Josh was able to kind of tie up, because we've talked once or twice about tying up flies and stuff like that. Josh was able to fray out a bobber stop, like those little line ties. He frayed one out, tied it onto the hook, used some dog hair because our dog is black and white, tied that right on there. And we did have to go out and adjust and kind of trim that tail down as we went. But, it was amazing. We caught bluegills and we found a whole pond full of goldfish that we hope to catch those one time as well.
Yeah, might need a net for the goldfish.
Might.
But I mean, when you show up to a spot and you don't have any baits, it's kind of nerve-wracking at first. But then if you just get a little bit creative with the stuff at the bottom of the box, sometimes you come up with something good, like the new bobber stop hair jig.
That was awesome. So let us know what you've been out fishing for, or if you were able to get out this past holiday weekend and do fishing, because, I'm interested in that. I think this weekend we have some walleyes coming up.
Yep.
And I think we're going to talk even a little bit of that here tonight. So let's bring in our guest because I'm super excited. So Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks guys. How you doing, Emily and Josh?
Yeah, thank
doing
you.
Better now.
Thank you so much for your patience through all of this craziness.
That's all right. We run into more than one snag in our life, so it'll be all
right. So with that, we're excited to be here with you because we definitely recognize your logo. But for anybody at home who doesn't know you yet, can you tell us about yourself?
Well, my name is Gary, and I own the Wolf River Cam. If you've ever seen the fish on the internet on the migration run on the Wolf River, the Winnebago system, if you've watched them, online, the walleye and sturgeon and carp and everything else under the sun, heading upstream for their annual spawning migration, you've more than likely seen it on our fish cameras. We've been doing it this is our 14th season, so 13 years. And we've got a couple different cameras. We used to have more, sometimes less, sometimes we expand more. Sturgeon cameras. Specifically, we're on the riprap areas where they're actually spawning. We get a close-up view of that, courtesy of one of our sponsors, Shadows on the Wolf. They put some cameras in the water and we help them stream them. But mainly, we're broadcasting our AquaView cameras. That's been a partner of ours basically for almost all the journey that we've been on, and the reliability allows us to keep them in the water for a really long period of time. And that helps us cut down on, we're fishing too. So I don't want to be spending time babysitting a camera all the time that doesn't work. So that's the good part about it. It's kind of set it up and set it ready to go, whatever. And it just runs, until you shut it off. So that's the great part about AquaView is the durability and the clarity too. So.
And so actually all of those things I'm interested in talking about, but I'm actually going to challenge
Steve.
Josh for a second. So despite all the technology issues that we had tonight, can you pull up one of the cams? Because we have we have the ability to, you know, pull it up on the screen. And so if there's anybody here who is not tuned into one of the cams yet, we'll be able to show you that actually in a quick second here. But Gary, I'm actually really surprised to hear that you said that this is your 13th year, your 14th season. I actually had no idea that you guys have been around doing this for so long.
Yes. So it all actually started in 2008. I had an idea that the basically idea was when we're not fishing, you know, we work day jobs just like you guys do and everybody else does. So we fish in the morning. We've always had a family member that's lived on the river, so we can dock our boats right on the river. So it's kind of a quick transition to get out in the boat and go in the morning. So we shove off at 4:45 in the morning, fish till 7, cruise back down river, jump in our vehicles, head to work. Hopefully we don't smell like fish too bad, but and get going at it. And then when we get home at night, eat a little supper, jump back in the boat and head out. So that's you know, something that's been we've done for years and years. That's just been kind of almost like a tradition. So my issue was when we're done fishing at 7 o'clock, or you know, we fish on the weekends quite a bit, but what's going on at 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning? Is the morning bite the best bite? I just kind of wanted to see what was going on with there's something heading downriver. I don't know if you're watching the same view I am. Actually, you're not. I've got it on my laptop here next to me too. I was on the other camera. I watched them go by.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so we were just kind of curious what was going on when we weren't here. So I kind of come up with an idea that I think it's going to involve a computer. I know it's going to, and somehow I got to be able to see it from over the internet somehow, and that's kind of where my plan started. It took me a year, maybe a year and a half, to try to figure out, knock all the kinks out. We're still working through kinks, but we're run pretty efficient now, and kind of put something together. We had an initial 6 sponsors, so we were talking about if we were going to have to pay for bandwidth, and I'm not now I'm kind of a techie gadgety guy. I know enough about computers to be dangerous. That's about it. So I had to figure out that I knew something like remote access was kind of a one-on-one thing, and I'm sure my dad would spend the whole day being on it, so I couldn't see it, so I had to do something else. Or my family members would be on it, we'd be calling either up and go, get off so I can watch it or something like that. So I know I had to have it for a broader audience. And at that time, once I figured it out, word got out on the message boards, and the power of message boards is so unbelievable. Like Lake Link was one of the big ones. There's another one further out in the Midwest that, or toward the west, whatever, that was influential as well too. And just the word spread fast. And literally the time from we launched that morning, I don't even remember what day it was, but in approximately, and at this time we were being metered on bandwidth, not to be too technical, but we had in a couple hours we ran out about $150 worth of bandwidth. I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. So I'm like, I'm shutting it off. I'm, good Lord, what's going on? And so I had to figure out a different way, and I knew I needed a website, and we had incorporated that a little bit. I don't know anything about building a website, so I kind of learned a little bit there too. And finally, we got to the point where people sometimes see advertisements, and they say, well, it's kind of in the way. I want to see the fish, but that's the trade-off for these companies that provide us. Let's say a YouTube you mentioned before, Facebook, that costs them money. For every person that watches that video, that costs them money. And then the trade-off is if they can run an advertisement to help cover that money, that advertiser helps pay for that. It allows us to broadcast for free.
Yeah, that is actually a really great point. And I got to imagine there's an amazing number of people that tune in to watch this. So that's got to be crazy, actually.
The numbers are, I'm impressed by the numbers every year. It's unbelievable. The reach across the country. I want to say globally, but and we do have traffic globally. Sometimes it's just computer stuff, searching through your website, whatever. But sometimes we do get people from different parts of the world that have seen it. But mainly it's mostly United States, very little bit in Canada, a couple percent. And the interesting part is that the reaches in the United States that I went to, my wife and I were on vacation one time, and we were way out by Las Vegas out that direction one time, and we were stopping through there, and we went to get a room, and as I'm sitting in the side room trying to book this room for the night, I give the gentleman my address, or email address, wolfrivercam@gmail.com, and the lady next to me turns to me and looks and says, "I've heard of that." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" She goes, "Well, my sister's from Appleton, so I mean," I'm like, "Okay," but so it's really interesting how far people have seen it. We're really condensed in the Great Lakes area in the Midwest. That's important to them. If this were a bass fishing something or other in the southern part of the country, that would be a big deal. Obviously, there goes fish. Goodbye. Must have been a small sucker. That would be something down in the southern where it would be really heavy, but it covers the nation pretty solid. So.
Well, and we actually even have Doug checking in here tonight. He's saying the Wolf River Cam is great and checking in from Iowa. And he's actually going out for the night bite. And I actually don't imagine he even means on the Wolf River. So I know exactly what you mean. That's so awesome. So one of the other things that you were talking about is having the AquaView cameras out there. And, we get this question all the time, on social media, all over the place. Like, what kind of camera can you put out there that you can see things? And I think that one of the reasons I love this example is because I reference the river system. Like, look at how much that you can see even in the river system. It's kind of amazing.
Well, a couple things we've learned about vision underwater. A camera can see twice as far as the human eye can underwater. Let's say if you had goggles on and you were down underneath the water and you could see 5 feet. Well, the camera can see 10 feet. That was something I learned. I picked up and I remembered it since then. That may have been from AquaView in the early days that said, "Hey, just so you know that this is kind of what it is," when we were trying to figure out distances and things like that. But this water is so brown stained because it's silt that we're sitting on, and a lot of the some of the staining, from what I've been told, whatever, comes from a lot of the tamarack trees and different things like that. So it has this. Sometimes actually on the high definition camera that you're watching right now, AquaView high definition camera right now, really handles the color very well. I mean, that's an extreme case of clarity there. I mean, this water's filthy. You can't see. You're gonna get a close up view in a second here. You can't see very much at all. I've got it live in front of me, so I got about a 4-second delay, whatever, so I can tell you when something's coming. But another one. Anyway, so I've got them trained by now that when they need to start swimming in front of the camera. So, but they just got a bite now. That's the other thing. But of course, them were suckers. But the staining of the color. Sometimes I'll see it on the standard definition cameras, where it'll have a really reddish brown tint, whatever, and it's trying to, when it's transitioning from like dark times to light times, it's trying to figure out what that is, because it really was never developed to say, okay, we're going to start with a red background or a tan tinted background, not a color neutral background. So sometimes I have to lift them up, it recalibrates, put it back down. Those are on the standard definition ones. The high definition ones, they handle that all themselves. It works out pretty sick. In a lake, it's not an issue because you just don't have the staining in the water as you do in the river.
And then what is your weight system to hold the cameras in place? That's got to be a job in itself.
It is. We went through a lot of different things. I'll just tell you, it's pretty substantial. And if I showed you one of the units I use, whatever, you'd be like, "Oh, well, that's genius. Who welded that thing up?" So that's about all I'm going to share.
Okay.
We used to use like a pole. And see, we want to get close to the bottom as possible. If I pull that camera up probably 3 feet, the silt path is a lot heavier than it is right at the bottom, and the current's a lot different as well too, as it is right on the bottom. You can kind of see, if you're looking at the bottom of the camera view right now, whatever, if you look higher up, you'll see the debris just go blowing by. Then look at the very bottom of the water, the leaves just kind of tumble a little bit. So the current levels, speed is a little bit different. So we want to be close to the bottom as possible. And we used to put them on the end of a stick, a broom handle, a paint handle, whatever the case would be, and we would attach it to a dock or something like that. Well, what happens when the first boat goes by at half throttle and 2-foot waves, it slams that camera down into the silt or knocks it off the railing. So yeah, we've been through our paces on that stuff. We used to do the same thing down with sturgeon, and one of the craziest stories I ever saw about or ever had seen or experienced about one of the Aquaview cameras is I had one on a pole, and it was where the sturgeon were spawning. And generally, it's a rip-wrapped area, faster current, deeper holes thereby. And during the night, sometime they were spawning and they knocked it off where it was clamped onto. So this camera on the end of a it's funny, on the end of a broomstick, it is down about 30 feet in a hole. And I've got the cord about halfway up the broomstick attached to it with a zip tie. So I'm pulling this camera up by its Kevlar cord, the camera's Kevlar cord rubber, and the stick is halfway in the current, so it's pulling just crazy heavy. Pulled it up, reattachment, camera worked fine. So super strong cables. That'll go away in 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a really cool thing. The reason the current's a little bit different like that is because you have to think about it like wind on a car. So when the water hits the bottom, it actually makes these little back eddies. And if you have a boat, if you drive around your boat with a like a radar sonar on it, you can see the little bumps in the bottom, and those are actually there, and those are caused by those little back eddies, and that's what makes that current slower on the bottom. And that's why a lot of river fish are like generally bottom dwelling fish, because they don't have to use a lot of effort, to move around on the bottom.
If you switch to camera 2 for a second, Shaggin' 2, it actually shows the back side of those, so you can kind of see some shaded areas. It almost kind of looks like the backside of a sand dune with the sun setting behind it. It's during middle of the day, it's really pronounced, but it kind of looks like you're looking at the backside of a windblown sand dune. Yeah. And some of them areas, there's leaves sitting in there, whatever. That's the backside of that little eddy that you're talking about.
Yep. So all these little bumps right here, that's what you're picking up on your sonar, and the fish a lot of times, especially towards post spawn for walleyes, they'll sit in those little depressions just to rest, because it's like there's almost zero current there. And
that's why those leaves are just like stuck there.
It's a really cool phenomenon.
Yeah, this one's pointing upstream. We haven't typically done that in the past, because usually you see them and they're gone, and as they're coming upstream, they're going a lot slower. That's why, and they're you can see them come into picture. And this way, when a walleye comes through, it's a second and it's through, or whatever fish is coming downstream, because the water's it's normal high for us. It's probably 3 or 4 feet higher than summertime, so it's pretty fast right now.
But that's a really good point, because sometimes anglers get really caught up. Oh, water's high, but water is normal high. So I appreciate the way that you put that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I get a kick out of the news crews that come around and go, "Do you have any high water?" I'm like, "It's all high water. We live in a river by river." So, and I know they're just trying to look for, check on a story and check on things. But if the people the local people start getting nervous, then everybody should start getting nervous, whether it's here or New London or Fremont. Then water's high. We've had a couple events in the last 5 years where it got to the point where we start sandbagging. I'm also on our local fire department as well, to our volunteer fire department, and we also do sandbagging. So we fill sandbags, lay them out, help people out. We have pumps and everything too. And we take everything back to the sandbags. We deliver, we don't pick up. So, but it helps out the community. That's what we're here for. But that's a huge undertaking in its own. We usually have a lot of volunteers as well, just people in the community that want to help. So that's a great community and camaraderie builder.
That is really awesome.
Yep.
Well, and as far as camaraderie builder, there's nothing better than watching fish on the screen. Because, not to be silly, but that is one of the ways that people, I think, really start to share fishing with each other, especially so early in the season like this. Not everybody has had a chance to be out on the boat. And I think one of the other things that's crazy is I think a lot of people plan their trips based on what they're seeing on these cameras. I guess earlier you had even referenced like people are watching from all kinds of places, but I think one of the things about that is maybe because they're coming to visit closer.
Yeah, and one of the really big misconceptions, or it's, and sometimes it's not the case, but when they start seeing them first, it kind of the fish, the walleyes come up in stages, and everything's coming basically from Winnebago, except for the first group that kind of dwell in the river system themselves, maybe Poigan. They generally move back. There's fish that'll stay around, further up the Wolf, whatever, depending upon how high the water is. The water really crashes. A lot of them will get out of here in a hurry. They're just going to head back to the lake and go to deeper areas where they dwell usually most of the year. That's why places like for ice fishing, like New London, Fremont, whatever, excellent ice fishing places for walleyes. Real early spring, late winter, in places like Cheyenne, maybe Lehman, are not as much because there's just a higher concentration of fish further down because that's where they head down. So when this first batch of walleyes come through every year, we'll start seeing them. Every one of them's got a big belly on. Those are our first big group of females that come through, and a lot of them are typically ones that dwell mainly in the river, and they're almost impossible to catch. If I catch 10 fish real early, pre-spawn, whatever, probably 5 of them are foul hooked, and obviously they go back. We throw back full spawners anyway, but that's usually what it is. This year actually it was kind of exceptional. We did have some that were they ate it fairly well, so that was good. But generally that's the case, and people see them, they go, man, I saw all them fish, but I just couldn't catch any. I'm like, well, that's all right. I couldn't catch any either. So they're really tight-lipped on their way up because they got one thing in mind is get those eggs out, and the water's a lot colder too. I mean, they're coming up in 38, 37 degree water. And the interesting part, and Josh, you could probably help me out on the technical side of it, or Emily, the fish that generally dwell in a river will make comments about if there's a group of fish coming through, usually later in the run up, whatever, you'll see them. They have a lot wider belly, a lot brighter white tips on their tails. And we tell them, those are Poigan or those are lake fish. And people are like, what do you mean? So, well, in my theory is the more golden ones, whatever, because they're in this silty water, whatever, they just, that's the color that they are, versus they get in that clear water, they tend to have a whiter bottom to them. I don't know if that's just fool's gold or that's really true.
I think there's something to that.
Yeah, so fish have a tendency, even in your live well, to change color to adapt to kind of their surroundings, and they also do it a little bit with stress. So they'll change color with how stressed they are, plus their surrounding. And so, yeah, the wolf or the just river fish in general tend to be a little bit darker just because most rivers are stained from the tannins from, leaves and trees and stuff. And then lake fish do tend to be, I would say lake fish tend to vary in color more, just depending
Sure.
on where you find them. Because if you find, sometimes in the spring, you'll find a really dark walleye or bass or something that's been tucked up in the weeds for a while, and it'll darken up just sitting in the weeds. But in general, yeah, I think you're right. The fish in lakes tend to be a little lighter.
Okay, so I have an off-topic question. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
We can come back to the fish. So I'm like looking at all these cams that you have. Like, are there people that like sponsor I know you can't tell me location, so I'm not asking that.
Sure.
But like, are you lucky that you own plots of land like all over the area that?
No, certainly not. No, we've got one location, but we do have people that are enthusiasts of the river. They like the cameras. They fish too. Those people are kind enough to host it, and they one of the other things as well is they're part of the community, and when the fish cameras start moving and we start showing people, hey, there's fish being caught, I'd like to think that we're I'll say we're tipping people off, hey, that there's a lot of activity going on as far as fishing the bite goes, and the boat landings get fuller. Now, I take a little grief from that. I'm like, well, it's not all my fault because that's been doing it for years, but I think people just get out a little bit sooner than they normally would, because the word of mouth through social media is a little bit faster than, somebody telling them at church or down at the tavern or whatever the case is, and they start to fill the boat landings up a little bit more, which means that the people that are local have to get up a little bit earlier to get to our fishing spot, but that's okay too, because that helps support some of the sponsors, the community for sure, and then some of the sponsors that we have, whether it be the local gas station, the Pump and Munch, which has bait, anywhere down to our local coffee shop and eating places and Johnny's Little Shop of Bait in New London. So that all helps support these smaller businesses, which they support me to help me if I need. That's basically what the equipment comes in, that they help pay for my equipment so I can make this happen. So that all happens. Aquaview obviously pays the role for cameras. I mean, if we're without a quality camera, and let alone them helping sponsor us, whatever, it's going to be a tougher go for sure. Lake, a big supporter. Locally, Plock Chevrolet, Lenny Burt and Sons, they all, if it's not equipment, if it's not word of mouth, it's money. That just straight out that this cost. I mean, one of the laptops I use for streaming one of the cameras, it's a gaming laptop. It's an $850 laptop, and it sits in a raft for 365 days of the year, whether it's cold or hot or raining out. I mean, it's protected from the rain, but that's quite a thing. And I've got one of those on each one of them. That's quite a thing to have just sitting in the elements with dust and dirt. And, we're still fishing around them too. So sometimes they get splashed with water and whatever else. But fortunately, we haven't shorted one out that way yet. So we've been close.
Well, and one of my other favorite things about the cameras is the education and awareness factor that it brings. One of my so it's fun to learn that this is going on your 14th year, because this is my 11th year living in Wisconsin. So my whole residency has grown up with the Wolf River Cam being around, and that whole time, ever since I found the Wolf River Cam. My background in natural resources, every chance I get to tell an educator, whether it's in Wisconsin or Minnesota or Iowa, I have them put it on in their classrooms in the spring, and the kids just love it. And it's not just because you can see the fish and stuff, but they get to see all the other little critters like the crayfish and the bugs and there's rocks and leaves and all of that stuff down there. And it just gives a really cool real life visual for kids to latch onto. And at the same time, hopefully it's providing a passion like I have for a species like lake sturgeon. Not everybody has those. We're very lucky to have a system so close to us and have them in our system so prolifically. And it just is like, I any chance I get, I'm like, everybody needs to watch the Wolf River Cam. You need to see these sturgeon, and get a chance, come visit the area when you see them on the camera, because it's so cool to come down and just watch them from like 10 feet away.
Yeah, and normally too, we usually don't see a walleye unless its gills are flared and it's trying to flop away from us. It's neat to see them just kind of nonchalantly make its way up the river, or the sturgeon at the whisker levels, I call it, what they look like underneath and when they're swimming by. It's the educational portion was something I actually I'd never really counted on a lot of stuff. Education for the classroom. There's been teachers that, hey, get all your work done. We'll turn on the fish camera, after everybody's got their work done in here in class. And I've been told by many teachers that they've used that, whether it be in the local community here or far as away as Iron Mountain, and I'm sure everywhere else too. And that was an interesting part. The part I really like about that is we're actually using, because I feel that, and I'm almost 50 years old, so I remember when there was no internet and there was no, I mean, the phone had a really long cord on the wall. Like my wife said, she used to have a 40-foot cord on the wall so she could talk to her boyfriend in her bedroom, whatever. But so I remember back in those days where if we had a a tin full of worms or night crawlers and some gas in the boat, where that's a great day for us, so we can go out and fish all day long. And I think that although there's different generations that how they react and how much they interact with the outdoors, and I thought this is actually, and this was a hindsight thing after it started, after I kind of analyzed things in our heads a little bit in my head. We're actually using in one of our video providers is Twitch. That's actually a hardcore gaming video provider. So what we're doing is we're actually taking the natural resources and we're kind of shoving it in front of kids' faces or younger people's faces, as well as everybody else. But some people are like, yeah, I pulled it up and I could see the fish going on. Sooner or later, I think it's really got to say, hey, that kid might say, you know what, let's go fishing. And that's fantastic. As much as I can use the technology against people that are really technology savvy and use it all day long to get them back out and connect with the outdoors, it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and as far as fishing goes, that is one of the things that I think everybody always gets really excited to see. Is sometimes I assume it must be you, like fishes in front of the camera. Like, I don't know how you make all those things match up, but that is just so exciting.
So there's one person that does it. I don't want to say his name, but he does it all the time. He'll text me at midnight and go, you know, that minnow to me reminds me, and he'll start going into a midnight text, whatever. And he's the one that takes care of that camera. And so we'll be texting back and forth at midnight, and we'll be laying in bed sleeping. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm talking to John. And he'll watch it all night long. And this year, actually, we had a pretty good sized northern pike strike, and he landed it. We put the picture out there, whatever, and released it. Nice fish, but they'll have a crawler on there, have a minnow on there. Occasionally on like camera one, I'll put a cane pole and basically put a rig out there. And what we usually run is probably like a number 13 Rapala or a scatter wrap. Typically scatter wraps, they work a little bit better. And when the water gets a little slower, it gets a little more action on them with that wider bill, or even a jointed scatter wrap. So we'll do some of that too, but the New London camera is the one that really, when they know out there, that's got a really good presence, and they have it on there for a long time. It's pretty cool.
It is actually really cool. And you had mentioned before the show that actually something that blew my mind. Did you say that you'd never use stinger hooks when you fish in the river? Because that's something I feel like I always have to do.
So I've never learned how to rig a stinger hook really well. We used to years ago, we hook them into the minnow, and then a few years ago, people were like, just leave it trail behind. It's not going to matter. And it would never jig right for me, and I just hated them. Then we came along with an idea one time, and I happen to have a rod here. At least it was a theory, and maybe it works. I still catch fish. So what we actually do, because we use a lot of hair jigs, and typically in our area, at least I have for a long time, if it's not an 1/8 ounce jig, it's usually not in my tackle box. What I'll typically do is I'll trim that hair on the jig to the bottom of the shank. Because I think if you had a longer hair out here, whatever, I think my opinion is that fish feels that artificial there, they just clamp down and leave. That's our theory we've been. So we actually cut it right to the shank of the hook. So once they get to that point, if they clamp down, it's too late. So
do you see the look on Josh's face? He's genuinely like the gears are turning.
Yeah, so that might be all. I mean, I don't know if we have data on the brain of a walleye, but that's basically what I've done. I see these big in certain times of the year, and maybe that's just early on when they're a little more picky. Sometimes they just swallow them, like crazy, and it's not a big deal. But there's days that one day might be fine, next day you might be I keep losing minnows, or you bring up and just the head's on the minnow and just can't figure out what's going on. We trim the hair short early in the spring, and it just gives it, when it hits that artificial feeling, if they're being that picky, then it's kind of too late once they clamp down and they're basically at the hook then. So that's a theory, and I don't know, it works pretty well. But same goes with plastics. I know a lot of people that are religious to plastics. I just can't dedicate myself to a whole season and really give them a good try. It's hard to. Minnows, it really varies. And interesting talking to people through Wolf River Cam interaction with people and just through fisherman camaraderie in general, it just seems that what works in New London or works in Fremont or works in Shackton, they just don't work in the same community. I don't know why that is. I think it's more confidence than anything else. You go out on your worst day and you're not catching anything. Then you put on something that, well, they fish with, these bigger jigs and larger minnows down in New London and they catch all kinds of fish. Well, you put it out there when you're not catching anything. Of course, you're not going to catch anything in that either. So you go back to what you knew. So it's probably something more along that lines. But when I tell people that, boy, this up here, the smaller minnows, the better, they kind of look at me weird. I'm like, yeah, if I can get an 1.5-inch minnow, it's king. If I got a 3-inch minnow on there, it just seems like they won't touch it. But again, maybe it's that part of the river, whatever the case is. I don't know. I think it's more confidence than anything else.
Well, and we've been told that around the state too. There's up by the Hayward area, what's that? Anyway, Hayward area, there's some bait shops that'll tell you to use the smallest leeches that you can, because they get a lot of tourism up there, especially from the Minnesota side. And in Minnesota, the thing is jumbo leeches. Everybody wants to go get big leeches. And, when you come over and you fish over towards Hayward and just a little east of there, they're telling you, grab the panfish leeches if you're going for walleyes even, because that's just what they eat. So, maybe there just is something where, just a little bit ago on the camera, there was some minnows hopping along the bottom and they didn't look that big. So maybe that's
right.
just what the forage is, you just have to figure that out. And it can vary, like you said, really early on, like the fish are different in the Shiocton, New London area than they are the Fremont and South area, so, even the forage can be different just in between those areas of the river too.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the effect too. Usually we'll hear from biologists from the DNR and they'll talk about the shad die off and the forage die off in Lake Winnebago. Depends upon how the winter was, and they really have a obviously impact when the fish are coming up, how hungry they are. That's obviously one of the biggest factors up here, or how good a minnow hatch we are in the Wolf. 3-4 years ago, they were everywhere. I mean, I put a light down close to the water and there was minnows all around it. It was pretty interesting, but it's cyclical obviously as well too.
So speaking of cyclical, what is the season of the Wolf River Cam like? How early does it come out? How late does it stay? When can we expect to see you?
So I guess we'll start with when we start in the season. So I put them through the ice. Putting them through the ice is fantastic. What a lot of people don't know is, how much ice will illuminate what's underneath. Ice fishermen know this, that, a body of water that's, out in the middle of a sunny day on a, clear day, sun shining out, whatever, reflects a lot of light. Whereas, as far as I know, if there's a layer of ice on there, it actually illuminates that. It charges that whole layer of ice, and that can actually have a huge impact on how much light is transmitted down into the bottom. It's kind of like a big glow stick. And we found that whether it would be in deeper lakes, like in the Bay, I had some people that were out doing some scouting up for lake trout. And they said they couldn't believe how much through the ice or with the ice, how much the light transmitted down to the bottom. So we like doing that. The problem is the logistics of getting a cord out to a fish camera through a hole on a thoroughfare where there's snowmobiles and recreational vehicles when the ice is thick enough. And I can usually accomplish that with a pop-up tent. The other problem is that when you lay that cord on the ice and the sun comes out, it'll melt into the ice. And if you try to chisel one of them out, I've cut more than a few of them. So 240-pound Kevlar cable does nothing to get in the way of an ice spud. So there's been a few. So I learned how to splice too. So, but we tried to do some of that. This year we did that all because the ice was getting ready to go out, and my brother was working on his dock. he's the best fisherman in the family, I think. But he caught a walleye on the tip up, and I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me! And I'm in the middle of Appleton somewhere. Had idea of about 2 weeks of putting a camera in, so there I am out there crossing out in a canoe and drilling a bunch of holes and sticking a camera in the water. Just because the fear is that what if they're coming up under the ice, and which apparently has happened before. But so that's kind of the happy medium. Is usually it's right when the ice goes out. We're able to get docks in and whatever the case is, whatever, then, our computer and stuff like that, we're able to put that in and do all that. But the issue that we have late winter, early spring, going through the ice is that when the ice lets go, I got excellent spot. There's a walleye coming down river. Get ready. It's right. It's about a 5-second delay. You'll see it in a second.
We
Anyway,
might be ahead
so-
of you.
Did you see it already?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right. I was looking at the screen. It might have been going through at the same time, but yeah, that was one going back. So, or just feeding. So the issue is that when that ice lets go, a lot of times when the ice lets go, whatever, it's because the runoff from the ground feeds that river and lifts that river up, and the sides break away. A lot of times the center of the river, that's, this year we probably had 24 inches or better, maybe almost 36 inches. A lot of that actually breaks up. It doesn't necessarily, to melt through that much would take forever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the issue, that when it starts to let go, ice on ice, it just makes ice cubes. And our issue is trying to get that camera, trying to save the camera. The longer I can make them last, the better. That's the happier AquaView is with me. They don't have to go, well, I need this many more or whatever. So we're actually running on a camera that I used all of last season, that I had through the ice this year already. And now that's camera one right now, and it's still working fantastic. So I've got one as the backup in case that goes down. I usually have a backup each location. And if that happens, if it's the peak of the year and I get a call from New London, went, hey, camera just went down, not sure, whatever. Usually it's probably the operator error, meaning me. I always have one available. It's just we haven't really had that instance. Even that camera, when I fired this year, that one still worked. So when they come out, we try to run them as much as we can through the summertime. Obviously, with waters rising and falling, that kind of plays a role into it. And then the brown algae comes around, and it's a heck of a time trying to keep that lens clean. Like when Josh was talking about, hydraulics and eddies and stuff like that on the front side of that camera, it kind of stirs right there at the lens. If I don't have it turned one way or the other, it can actually really get a lot of brown algae formed on that lens. And I got to be really careful to clean them a lot. Me being careful to clean them, people say, use a soft cloth. Well, I just dip my hand in the water and rub the end of it. And they actually tolerate that pretty well. So that's usually the issue. Then we'll run them as much as we can. The activity kind of drops off during the late summer months. Everybody's out doing things, activities, and at the cottages and everything else as well too. So it gets a little bit slow. Fall, a little bit slow too. We usually get them out around that time, because the ice is going to start to form, and that really makes things difficult. That's actually worse than having ice, because I know when there's ice there, that the possibility of getting out to something is hard. But the when the ice is forming, it's really tough to do, because you're always breaking through ice to get there and everything. So that makes it a little bit difficult. So generally, late fall, when we get our docks taken out, that's usually about to then. I've run them through the winter time and everything. It's really hard on equipment, whether it's computers or the cameras themselves, because like I said, I'm more than once I've chopped through a cord or two, and that really makes it difficult. And it's just easier on the equipment. And honestly, that there's not much to see then. There's still a lot of other things, rough fish, and our game fish as well too, walleyes and perch, whatever the case is, crappies. Just not as prevalent, and we just don't have the amount of viewers late falls, certainly, as we do in the springtime. So as we do that, these computers are running, the cameras are running, they're commodities, so they're using themselves up, and the highest best use is sometimes waiting for springtime and utilizing it the best there. So
man, okay, so There's like a million more questions that I want to ask you. And our time is dwindling. But one really random one. Do you really have enough sun that's what's illuminating your shack right now?
Right now, yeah, that's what it
Oh
is.
my
The sun
God,
actually
that is
just
fabulous.
set a little bit. Yep. And you'll notice that there was a comment that was made to me one time. They were asked if they were watching the fish camera, and it was like 9 o'clock at night, completely dark out. And they said, no, they just run the video during the day. And I'm like, no, that's not the case. We actually like the fish cameras from above. And the reason why we like them from above is Aquaview has an excellent lighting system on their cameras. It's just that, and I'll actually, if you've got one of the cameras up, I'll show you what it looks like when you put light in a silty environment. I'll watch, see which one you got, and I'll crank the light up. Now in it,
which one do you want?
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Okay, we'll go number one.
Well, yeah, one or two. Yeah.
Number two.
Yeah, one or two doesn't matter. Just not New London. I can't get to that one.
Okay, we will put up number two.
Okay, so when number two comes up, because that one's getting a little bit dark. I've got somewhat of a light in that location, but when I turn the light up on that one, and actually one might even be better to see, but that's what it looks like.
Fish right in front of there.
And you get all these tiny particles in the river. And that's what makes it so hard to transmit light, to see underwater and things like that, whatever. That's why that's why we don't light them from the camera aspect. And we've messed around with this for years and years. Whereas you go to, we'll look and see. Anyway, we typically light them from above because it makes illuminating that particle, it illuminates it from the top and the camera doesn't see it.
Oh,
walleye. Saw that? Yep, it was. Ugh. Killing me. So that's something we learned along the way that works really well. Now, when we start to get, like right now, we're probably right around 11 feet is what the meter is for the river here. And whatever that equal, they measured out the highway bridge. When we get to the 13-foot range, 2 feet deeper than this, it's hard to get light to penetrate that far down, let alone try to keep anything in the water straight and pointing in the right direction. It gets really tough. So it's that's challenging. But yeah, showing all that silt is tough. And on camera one, it's really hard because, like you were talking about, like here it just goes by and that's it. On camera one, it'll swirl in front of it. That makes it pretty interesting. So, and it's nearly impossible to see. So we decided a long time ago that we need to do it. We've tried pond lights and we've tried all kinds of stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Well, and one of the things that was happening on our screen, so I don't know how it's translating to the viewers at home, but when you do turn that light on, we can see the interference, the floaties in the water and all of that, but there was also like these weird like lines that were kind of floating through the screen. And I can tell you as somebody who's used an Aquaview that when you are in person, those lines are not there. So I'm not sure if that's just the amount of technology we're filtering this video through right now or what.
No, that's here too. And the reason why that is that it's how this system gets hooked up for broadcasting.
Okay.
Because I've got power strips and all kinds of computer hooked up to it, so that's all a matter of that. We've never, and actually on the older cameras, when the old blue CRT boxes, we didn't get that as much, but that's just a product of what we are. On the HD camera, I don't get that. It's just a matter of the cable, I believe, that comes out of the video output. One's an RCA cable, the other one's an HDMI. So that's just part of it as well too. So it's just all in our rigging. It's not has anything to do with the product at all. So
cool.
Either way, though, I know that people at home are going to continue to be watching these cameras. Yeah, now that I point out the sun is when you need to
right. I'm like, boy, it's dark in there.
But I know that people are going to be watching a lot because sturgeon season is coming up, and that is, as much as people love watching walleye, you wouldn't believe how much people love watching sturgeon. So that is going to be happening. But the cool thing is people are out there watching for all kinds of species and all kinds of things. So no matter what you're looking for, let us know what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, and it's a good segue into the announcement I published that I was going to say tonight. That I'll let you guys know as well too. That we've always, people always say, "Hey, I saw what's this fish," and I'm always getting an email or whatever to say, I saw this. What is this? Lately, it was a buffalo carp. I've never caught a buffalo head carp before. I've never seen one. I've caught every fish in this river, I think, but I didn't. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I looked it up. I'm like, okay, that's what it is. And because people are like, is this an invasive species? We had the same thing with when we had a camera at the Shawano Dam years ago. The shad that would come in there, an adult shad is got to be 14 inches. They're enormous, and people are like, that's a shad. And I was looking, I'm like, what is this thing? And I asked biologist whatever. He goes, well, that's an adult shad. I'm like, I thought there were these little things that no, they go, they can be that big. And it was really interesting to see, but I get all the time people ask me, what's this fish? Or they'll put it on the page, or I'll put it on the page, and there's usually somebody will chime in and say, this is what it is, and they're part of this family, and they'll give kind of a rundown. Usually everything's pretty accurate. The community around, whether just fishermen or on social media, whatever, they're pretty cunning for sure. And what I had an idea of, because people always ask me about Asian carp, and you go, do you think there's evasive species? Obviously, there's goby around, not necessarily in the river system, although people say it is. They're in the Bay or in the Great Lakes. People ask me about Asian carp all the time, and I got to thinking this year a little bit, and I said, it actually, we use this tool, this fish cameras, for a lot of different things, and using the audience because we get so much feedback like that, it would be kind of a great resource to ask the people, hey, if you see something like that, let us know. And that's probably engaging enough, because the impact it will have on the system. If we have something like an Asian carp in the system, obviously if we see it on a camera, there's a lot more of them out there. So I kind of got an idea together. I talked to Aquaview and I talked to Shadows on the Wolf, and I said, why don't we, and myself, let's put together a bounty for somebody that can get me a screen capture off of one of our fish cameras of an Asian carp. Now, certainly they're going to have to send it to us. A few of us are going to have to get together, maybe some input from the DNRs. And I know they're very technical because they're biologists, and there's certain levels but they can give us a little bit of insight what it could be if there's something that, like years ago in the shad, they said, well, no, that's what that is probably. I don't have the fish in my hand, so it's hard for me to tell, but it's probably what that is. So they're very careful, and they want to be definite. That's what they do. So we got this idea together, and what we're going to do is launch at midnight tonight is we're going to put a bounty on if somebody can get us a screen capture of an Asian carp. And that bounty is going to be, we're kicking in $250 from Aquaview, Shadows on the Wolf, and Wolf River Cam. So it's going to be a $750 bounty if somebody can give us a screen capture of an Asian carp.
Well, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, what that's going to do is, my first thought is we'll probably never have to pay it, and that would be an excellent scenario. If we and because then that means that maybe there's none here, and that's fine. I mean, there's a little bit holding them back, but there's literally an electro barrier and a dam, I think, is the only thing that's really holding them back between here and Chicago. But if we do, it can be an early intervention to say, hey, we at least need to start looking a little bit further. Maybe they did get upstream. So that was basically kind of our effort to, that's our big announcement, that we were going to put that together and try to help have the audience help us and help everybody else as well too.
Well, that's super awesome. And I don't know about you, Emily, but I think at $750, let's round that number up. Let's put $1,000 on those fish heads.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and again, it's something that I part of me, I have no problem whatever paying it, and anybody else involved too, because that means that we can, if we see it and we've got some confirmation that, hey, this is what this is, then we know, hey, we need to start looking for these. And obviously everybody on the biological side of it, whatever, the scientists, whatever, will be like, okay, we have to do something. Or if we never have to pay that out, that maybe means that we haven't seen one. And there's a lot of fish that come by our cameras, so maybe there isn't an issue ever. I'm not saying there is or isn't, but it's just something out there that somebody's sitting at home, just watching or sitting at work, whatever. That there's a chance they could next fish that swim guy could be $1,000 for them. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that guy. That's awesome.
Absolutely. That's a great thing, I think.
And then can you remind us, if people do get that screenshot, where can they post that or submit that, or how do they go about that?
So they can just send that to wolfrivercam@gmail.com. So it's our name, wolfrivercam@gmail.com, and they can send it to us. They can mark it however, I'll read it. If they want to send it via messenger to our Facebook page, that's fine too. My wife Kim watches some of it. I watch the other part. It takes a team on the back end of it too. I tried to get her down here, but there's no way she's going to be on camera. She's the quiet one. She goes, I'll just do the other stuff. You the one, you talk on the TV. So, I get it.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So all of you in Facebook and YouTube land, get the word out, share this out, tell everybody if you see one of those Asian carps on the camera, make sure you shoot that over to wolfrivercam@gmail, and you could win $1,000.
And by all means, if you can't remember the address, if it sends over to you guys in Crappie Junction, forward it to us. Obviously, I'm going to ask you guys to have a look at it as well too. You're one of the people involved. We'll send it to Aquaview, Shadows on the Wolf. We'll have somebody, probably stateside, whatever, take a look and just give their opinion on it. Obviously, they're bound by some real specific scientific things that they would want to know, but at least they can give an idea that, hey, no, you're crazy. This is a greater northern blah blah blah, whatever, that we've never seen before, or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that comes by that camera. Like you were talking before, Josh, if nobody's ever, you see a fish go by, whatever, that you typically don't see, they're just swimming along nice, gently. I mean, if you ever seen a mud puppy pull it out of the water, it's twisting, turning, but if you see it crawling on the bottom with its gills flared out, it's really kind of a neat looking thing. So
it's so cool. Hey, we had one more quick comment. So Hero Fishing, one of the other great organizations here, they wanted to offer another $250.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So
that's incredible.
Our buddy Kent over there at Hero Fishing will I'll have him get a hold of you, or Kent, if you're listening, just email Gary at wolfrivercam@gmail. But that's a great organization too. They bring all heroes of all kinds of the community. Could be a vet, could be a teacher, whoever gets nominated on their website. They do a couple trips out to Idaho, and just
awesome.
all-inclusive trip. So all you have to do is get to the airport, and they take care of the rest. Bring you out on a great fishing trip, and they do that a couple of times a year. Kent's awesome. But yeah, thanks, Kent. That's awesome.
Yeah, Kent, that's incredible. I really appreciate it. And as far as for it's Heroes Fishing, if that's
Hero
correct?
Fishing, yep.
Hero Fishing. I mean, whatever we can do. I mean, it's the least we can do. Obviously, for what our heroes give.
Awesome, cool. That's up to $1,250, everybody.
$1,250. That's awesome. That's incredible. I was thinking that a couple $100, whatever, would be pretty neat. And then when I reached out, you guys having the response you did, Hero Fishing, Shadows on the Wolf, and Aquaview, they were a shoe in. They said absolutely no problem. So that's it's incredible. It's going to be a neat thing. And again, it's going to be something that hopefully we never see one, but if we do, it can be a early intervention type of thing. That would be fantastic.
Perfect.
So with that, I know that we could probably sit here and chat all night, but I won't make you do that.
No, that's all right. I'm in my fishing shack. You guys are at home, so.
But before we do leave, I was hoping that you could remind people, just in case they haven't made their way there already, how could they find the cams, and then how do they follow you on social media?
So we're going to be under Wolf River Cam, WOLFRIVER. So Wolf like the animal, River like the body of water. Then Cam is short for camera, CAM. .com is our address, and you'll find us on social media as well too. Under the same one, just kind of look for our logo. You'll know that's us. And which actually I only come up with that logo a year or two ago. You think after 13 or 14 years, whatever, I could have figured something out, but I'm like, I just can't. And yeah, so anyway, that's a long story, but so this is a really expensive $65 shirt that I went and had made at the mall. So my wife's like, let's just go make one. I'm like, do you realize how much they cost? She's like, they're expensive. I'm like, well, he's got to have one for the show. So, yeah, so check us out on social media as well too. And we're very active on social media. We watch it quite a bit. So if you're sending me a picture at 5 a.m. of catching fish, I will see it and I will find you. And we'll be, I won't be fishing next to you, but it might be just a little upstream for you. But anyway, we get out fishing early too. So be prepared if I start flashing walleyes in my hand at 5:30 in the morning. So, but yeah, check us out there and go to our website, and you can top on the menu. We'll have some sponsors displayed there as well too. There's a menu on the top. There's also a menu down below at the very bottom, a navigation bar. Select which camera you have. Before it showed the streaming provider. Twitch had a little screen to come up, whatever. It stays on there for 30 seconds if you're not subscribed to Twitch. It's free to use this camera. It's free to watch them. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to download anything, provided you have a current browser and things like that. But send me those questions too. I'll answer them as well too. If you're having some troubles, I get questions at least a couple a day, because I got to keep in mind that some of the questions, somebody comes in and goes, I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't whatever. Those are usually my dad or people like my dad or my mom that in their 70s, and they just want to see the fish is all they want to see. And I take as much time as we can, Kim and I do, to walk them through and get them seeing the fish, because that's obviously our biggest thing. When I get phone calls of, like Josh you mentioned about and Emily mentioned about the education side of it, but the guy that had his hip surgery done, he was laid up for 2 months in a bed or whatever it was, and he just sat and watched the fish camera. He goes, boy, time passes away quick. Those are the kinds of things that really make it worthwhile. So that's part of it. If not for those things, I don't know, I'd still be watching them, but probably just myself. So, but yeah, that's why we keep them on online. Because it's just so many different ways people utilize them. So
that is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, and Gary, thank you so much for being here and talking about all this with us tonight.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate you guys kicking in toward our invasive species bounty and hero fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. As well too, and we'll get that put up tonight, and we'll post that for everybody, and you can keep your eyes peeled. The sturgeon are going to be ramping up pretty quick. That's going to be, they may start a little bit this weekend. It's certainly worth the trip to the sturgeon areas, whether it be County Highway X in New London, Bamboo Bend and Shackton, to see some of those areas. Those are probably the more prolific ones. Shawano Dam, obviously they pile in there as well too. It's just, that's a long swim for them. So that's sometimes later than the other two, but by probably mid next week, water temperatures should be up there. I looked at it this morning. It was 40, 43 and a half. So still fairly cool for a sturgeon to spawn yet, but there's plenty of them here. I lost a couple more jigs this morning. So sometimes I know what it is. I'm like, I just break the line and just move on. But so yeah, check those out. They'll be going again. Bamboo Bend is where you'll find that camera location. Click on that one. We've got 2 cameras running now. We got 2 more on the way. We had a breakdown in cameras. So we got those. Those are not AquaView cameras. Those are provided by Shadows on the Wolf, and it's a different company that does like a commercial grade, because they've got some supporters from them that provided those. So, but we're going to stream them, help them on that aspect. We kind of got a partnership there, and so you can see those cameras on our website as well too. So
awesome.
That will be awesome. We will look forward to that. I know the people at home are too. Thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight, and we're looking forward to seeing you on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everyone.